Welcome back to more panel beating, starting out with plasma cutting. Enjoy!
Before I start cutting on that and forming that one, I did a little experiment with some scrap. I like doing experiments with scrap because it's fun. You can learn a lot from doing this. Anyways, what I tried to do was try to bend the radius in here by shrinking. Now, I went to the shrinker stretcher, and you can't get a whole lot in a short distance. That's the problem, because this is my shrinking area, not very big. So I basically put a bunch of tucks in it. Okay, so I would tuck it, hammer, tuck, and hammer. And you can see what happens over time. The metal itself is starting to crack. So I've basically reached the limit of what I can do with this. So in order to get the tighter bend in the actual piece, I'm going to have to start cutting relief cuts in here and bend it over and then weld it back together again. Now, strangely enough, doing an experiment with the stretcher, and it was no problem getting that kind of stretch. The only thing that's going to be kind of a deviation from factory is that this width here is a lot shorter. So it actually curves in a little bit. Yeah, I can live with that, and it's underneath the car. Nobody will see it. Okay, we got a whole bunch of little spot welds and ground them nice and flush. Well, not quite flush. It's still a little bit, you'll feel a little bit of a ridge there. But we're going to play a little bit of Bondo hide and seek with that one. Now, I will point out here the biggest reason why I lap jointed as opposed to butt welded is because now the panel, because it slips underneath that little bit of a lip, I have no grinding to have to deal with underneath. I've got a couple of vice grips holding this together, and you'll notice there's a gap here. That's intentional. And I've seen a lot of guys, they will have things all nicely close butted up, and then they TIG weld. That's fine. TIG weld and rust don't work well. So that's one of the reasons I still use MIG, because if I do have a bad spot, I'm not going to be, if I blast a hole, I can fill it. TIG's a royal pain in the butt for doing that. But I got some room to move because I do want to keep this, the surfaces the same. Yeah, the gap doesn't scare me, and I'll tell you why. When we start putting tacks and we start stacking tacks, we'll get better penetration if we've got a gap. And so if this thing wants to move, and the way it's set up now, if it wants to move, whether expand or contract, I've got movement in here. This will move one way or the other because it's not welded yet. It's only got a couple clamps holding it. And the flange itself has got some flexibility in it. But this way, the material has a place to go. So I don't have to worry as much about warpage that way. You'd be amazed what you can do with a dolly. I had a low spot here, high spot. I didn't bother showing you with the camera because there's not much to show you. Just tap down on here, go underneath, tap up on here, and now it's... These are factory wrinkles. I don't want to mess with them, so I don't mind it wrinkly in here. It looks more factory. But other than that, that is good. Right now we've got some flexibility, which means I can get the motor mounts in. If I close this off and try and put them in, good luck trying to get them in. So these have to go in now. So it's not as bad as I thought, because you can actually compress this down a little bit. There's enough forgiveness in the body belts. I can actually get this flush now. I have to tap this up a little bit, but other than that, we can make it fit. As I'm forming this metal around, what's happening is as it's pulling in here, putting a curve in here, which I don't want, I think my solution is I'm going to have to stretch this to pull this out this way to hopefully flatten this section out again. Well, that made a bit of a difference. All right, one of the tricks I'm doing is when I'm trying to form this corner is I'm actually using the light for a C with parallel with the edge. So I want this bend obviously square with this edge. And I'm basically just using the light reflection to see where the line is. So let me show you what's going on here. What we have is a wonderful amalgamation of ice grip clamps, because we got a spot weld in between this point in here. I'll show you the little trick for spot welding for there. So I had to clamp it here. I'm not worried about this gap. I will pinch these as I go along, spot weld that as well. And I got to figure out where the lines are going to be, because I'm going to spot weld from the top around here as well. Okay, I'll point out the finished result. But one of the things I will point out is I'm not perfect. If you linger a little too long, you'll end up blasting through the main plate. See, this I actually bonded here on the edges and did the same thing here. But yes, it's a hollow, and yes, I can fix it with a MIG welder, so I'm not too worried about it. It's the underneath that's a real pain in the butt to get at, so that's really came in handy for using this technique. I've got the panel sitting here, and after I had it pretty much where I wanted it shape-wise, I intentionally deformed it a little bit. I actually bent this up a little bit and bent this up into it. The logic behind it is it's a lot easier to push the panel down as I go along than to try and pull it back up again. So I knew this was right at one point, but as I start in the center, I work my way down. I'm still going to have to manipulate the panel, but I'd rather push down than up, hence it sits up a little bit. The other thing I'll point out is I actually overbent this, and the logic being is I don't want this pushing out on me. When I go and spot weld in here, then I'll pull this together towards it with the vice grips. To be perfectly honest, watching grinding to me isn't very entertaining. It's certainly not entertaining doing it, but it needs to be done. What point a couple of things out now that's blended is I use the hard disk for roughing it down, just get high spots off, and I like using the flap disk to blend. Now, one of the tricks is when blending to try and remove as little of the base material as possible just in the weld area. There's a high spot here and a high spot here. We're just going to tap that down. Still got a spot weld in here yet. You got to remember, this is a floor with all kinds of waves in it, so we're not trying to make a straight panel here.
Well, that's it for this one. Again, I'd like to thank you guys for watching and subscribing. And as you can see, we've still got a pile more work to do. Anyways, see you on the next one, and bye for now.